Okay, Dad, let's start with your name.
My name is Harvey Hensley, and I was born in Leslie County on the 22nd day of March, 1923. My dad and mom was Chester Hensley and Lucinda Hensley. I'm one of 12 children. One is deceased. When I was born, there was 5 older than I and 5 younger than I, and I was the middle one. And after 6 months in Leslie County, my dad and mom, they moved to Berea, Kentucky, in Madison County, and they lived there for a year, and then they moved to Garrett County, to Cartersville. We lived there till I was 7 years old, and we moved from Cartersville then to Rockcastle County. And after moving to Rockcastle County, we were just across the Rockcastle County line. We moved from there to Crooked Creek in Rockcastle County. That's coming out of Pine Hill, Kentucky, off of Route 25. We lived there till I was 16 and a half years old. And in 1939, on the 20th day of December, I joined the CCC, the Civilian Conversation Corps, and went from there to Idaho. After 6 months at Devil's Elbow, Idaho, we moved to Washington. I moved to Washington State at Mount Vernon, Washington. And I was there for a year and a half. And while I was there, we built roads and planted trees and cleaned highways and the kind of work that we did. And I become a field leader. And I had a friend that was a flyer for, he flew the plane for the Forest Service, and he taught me how to fly. And after a year, he went home, and the job was turned over to me. And in 1941, the government started cutting back on the 3 Cs. They was sending a lot of boys into the Army at that time. They had already started a draft. That was during the war of World War II in Europe. And on the 5th of December 1941, I joined the Navy. And on the 6th of December, I was sworn in. And on the 7th, the Japs struck Pearl Harbor. And after I was sworn in, I caught a train and went to Livingston, Kentucky, and I went to my dad's house in Birch Holler. And I was there for 3 days, and when I went back to service, I went to Pine Hill. I caught the bus at Pine Hill, and the last thing that my dad told me, he went to the bus with me. He told me, he said, "Son," says, "I'll pray for you every day," and said, "You'll come back." After 4 years, I come back home, and when I got back, my dad was the first one I saw as I come to the top.
Okay, you were talking about when you met Mom, Dad.
Okay,
You ready?
now, whenever that I met Laura that day, my sister had told my brother-in-law that Bill, that she needed something from the grocery, and I told her, I said, "I'll go down and get it for you." And Laura says, "I'm going to go with you." So all the way down to the store, it's about 1.5 miles. As we went down the road, well, she told me all the happenings that went on while that I was gone. And I went in and got the groceries that Maggie wanted, and whenever that I come back out of the store, as we come off of the store porch and out onto the road, Laura says to me, says, "Now since you're discharged and you're home, what's your plan? Are you going to go away and work, or you're going to stay here, or what are you going to do? And I said, I guess maybe that I'll just get married and have a bunch of kids, live around here. And she says, who are you going to marry? And I said, just as well to be you, because I don't have no other. And that was when we got engaged. So that was on the 21st day of December in 46. 45, I'll correct that. That was in 45. So we went from down to Roundstone in Rockcastle County. We went from there to Bond, Kentucky, and I met her parents, and we told them that we was getting married, and we went and got married on the 2nd day of January in 1946. So that was where it started. Whenever that we got married, shortly after that we was married, we bought a farm, and we was going to farm. And after the season was over, I found I was no farmer, so I went from there to Public Works. And my first son was born on the 13th day of October, 1946. My next son was born in, my daughter then was born in 48. And then I had a son born in 1950. That was Walter Lee. And whenever that he was born, well, then I worked on to, for a few years, and after that he was born, well, we had 13 years, I believe it was. Our third son was born, and that was Ray. And after he was born, why, he grew up to be a pretty good-sized kid, and we moved to Washington State. And when we moved to Washington State, well, then we done a little bit of tugboat, and we run gravel plants, and we done things like that. And moved back to Kentucky then in 1979. 77, I'll correct. In 77, we moved back to Kentucky, and there we stayed until now. But getting back to my beginning, whenever I first went to service, I was already knowed how to fly a plane, so I went into Navy Aviation. And I went straight into school to learn navigation and to learn radio. And I joined the squadron on the 8th of February, 1946. 1942. I joined a squadron, and we went from there to Washington State. I went aboard ship.
Where were you when you joined the squadron, Dad?
I was in Jacksonville, Florida, whenever I joined the squadron. And we trained there for a while, and then we went to Whidbey Island in Washington State. And that was where we practiced carrier flying, landing, and taking off on a carrier.
What kind of plane were they training you in?
They was training me in a F4F. I first started training in, and then I trained in a F6F, and I trained in a SB2C. That was the Helldiver, the bomber. And in the last of February, we went aboard ship. I went aboard the Yorktown, and just off of the coast of California. And when I went aboard it, we went to the South Pacific, and we went to the Coral Sea. And we was down there a short time, and the Japs bombed the deck on our ship, and tore it up pretty bad, so we was heading back to San Diego for repairs, and as we went by Honolulu, they called us in there, and they sent us to Midway because the Japs was getting ready to invade Midway. And on the 5th of December, on the 5th of June in 1942, we met up with the Jap fleet, the same carriers that had hit Pearl Harbor, and we sunk 4 carriers. We sunk 6 cruisers, 2 battleships, and 14 destroyers. But my ship got hit and was sunk, and when I come back in that night, it was a little after dark. The ship was on fire. They was trying to put it out. It was under tow, and they sent me to the Enterprise, which was 160 miles. I went to the Enterprise, and after I got on the Enterprise, the Yorktown sunk. I got on the Enterprise, and we went back to the South Pacific. And I stayed in the South Pacific for 39 months before I come back to the States. And then when I got back to the States, instead of staying on in the Navy, why, I had my time up, and I just come out. And after that was when my family started. I got married, and when I got married, why, we farmed, and we worked construction and all of the things. And after 56 years, I lost my wife, Laura. She passed away. And since then, why, I've just grown older, got uglier, and trying to live the rest of my life out. That's just about the story of my life.
Then you gave Bethel an ugly old living out his life, man.
Then I got...
You tell about Bethel first.
Then I got, after Laura passed away, I got married again. I got married to, used to be Bethel Cummins. When I was young, we went to school together some, and we got acquainted. But she married and was married for 54 years, lost her husband. I was married 56 years. I lost my wife, and Bethel and I, we got married, and we have been married now for 5.5 years. And we've enjoyed every year that we've been married. We've done a lot of running around, and we've done a lot of things that she never got to do in her lifetime. A lot of things I always wanted to do, and we've had a wonderful life up till now. So I just pray that God will keep us together and let us still live on for a while longer. So that's about the story of my life.
Now let's go back to when you were in the Philippines, when the ammo dump was found.
Oh.
Tell about the whole,
Well,
the start of it and how you guys found it.
yeah, whenever we first went to the Pacific, we worked all the way up through the islands till the invasion of Leyte and in the Philippines. And whenever I was out scouting, I located an ammunition dump. That was where the Japanese had all of their ammunition stored that they was using on us. And I reported it, and whenever I did, well, the ship sent out more planes, and we bombed the ammunition dump. And we exploded the whole mountainside that they had it stored in. From that on, why, they didn't have the ammunition. We shot down planes every day. We shot down planes. During my time while I was in the air, from the time that I started to, and from the time that I started till I got out, I shot down 24 planes. I got credit for sinking a cruiser. I come in, and whenever I dropped a bomb on it, it went through the stack into the engine room and blowed up in the engine room. And they give me and another guy credit for sinking the cruiser. And destroyers, I've hit several of them. And I never was shot down, but I was shot up. My planes was shot up enough. That's when I come aboard. 5 times they pushed the plane over the side because they wasn't repairable. One time that I come in and the plane exploded whenever I landed, just as I got out of it. But I made it. I never was hurt. Never one time ever got hurt. And when I come back to the States, we come back to Bremerton, Washington, and the President of the United States come aboard the Missouri, which they signed a peace treaty on, and he presented them with a medal, and then he come aboard our ship because we had shot down more planes and sunk more ships than any other carrier.
Okay, which ship was that at the time? What ship were you on at the time?
I was on the CVE 78 whenever it, the Salvo Island, and we shot down more planes and sunk more ships than every other carrier out there during the war. And the president presented us with a presidential citation. So from
that
there,
was December?
That was December the 13th, 1946. 1945. And so that's when I come back out of the Navy. So that's about all that there was to it.
That was the whole war?
That was it.
Well, let's go back to when you were young, before you went into the service. Tell about when you went through the caves with your friend. Is that the friend that went in the service with you? Remember when you guys went wandering through the cave and you came out the other side of the hill?
Oh, yeah. I went through that cave so many times. What's part of the story?
When you went all the way through it?
Yeah.
By yourself, in the dark?
Yeah. But
what cave was that?
That was the Saltpeter Cave.
Over by Baker's, is that one?
No, that was the Saltpeter Cave was the one I went all the way through. The Baker Cave didn't go all the way through the mountain.
Who did you go through that with? You started out with somebody. Whose initials did you show us inside that cave somewhere? You said he went in the service with you, and you came back and he didn't.
I'd have to think. I got my initials. It was too many. I guess I wouldn't know. Had to be Donald Mank, probably, or Bill Thurland Mullins.
I think it was Mullins, maybe, Dad.
Bill Thurland, I guess it was.
Is he one that you guys built that stone house with?
Oh, yeah, he's the guy.
Yeah.
But
we'll have to have pictures of your stone house. I got the pictures he can put in. The stone house you guys built when you were young? Had your concerts?
Now that's been a long time since I built that building. Elmer, he's been down there and seen it. You saw it. All the kids, I think, saw it. But it was...
Now you got your pilot's license, and you got your ship's, how did you have a tugboat? What kind of license did you need for that?
Oh, that was maritime license for the tugboat. I run a tugboat for about 8 years, and I had commercial license, maritime license. So I used it to haul barges and to haul logs, and berth ships and whatever. I worked in the harbor at Seattle and also at Everett, Washington, and at Bellingham, Bremerton, all of those ports up through there I worked in. So I've been all the way up the coast, up through the Interlet, all the way into Canada and up to Alaska and back. So,
well, name off all the ships that you were on in the order you were in.
Well, the ships that I was on, I first went aboard the Yorktown, And I was on the Yorktown till the 5th of June in 42 when it was sunk. And then I went aboard the Enterprise, and I was on the Enterprise a year, and it went back to the States for repair. And I went from there aboard the Cowpens, which was a converted carrier. It was converted from an oil tanker and had a flat deck on it for landing. And after that, I went aboard the Savo Island, the CBE, and I stayed on it till the war was over. And that was the one that I was on whenever I left and come back home. So I was on 4 different ships. Had 39 months at sea.
Okay, you got 12 more minutes, so you just talk about anything you want to.
So whenever that I come back home and I saw all the family, got married, started a life, and I'm still living it. And I'll never forget the night that I served, that I prayed and gave my heart to the Lord. That was on the 7th day of February 1947, on a Thursday night. And that was whenever that, and I have been, tried to live a Christian life ever since then. And the Lord has been good to me. My health has been good, and I've lived 80 plus, and I'm still living. I don't know how much longer, but I enjoy it.
Now, Dad, start with how your arm was hurt and what they did and why you have 2 arms now.
Well, whenever that, while I was living in Washington State, I was running a gravel plant, and I caught my arm in a conveyor belt. The belt stalled it, and I tried to start it, and I was cleaning out around the head pulley, and the belt did start. And when it did, it jerked my arm in, and it went around the head pulley and cut my arm off. All but just about an inch was all it was liking. Broke my elbow up and broke my arm up. And I went to the hospital, and they told me they couldn't sew it back, that it wouldn't never work again. They wanted to amputate it, and I told them to sew it back, that we'd see what it would do. They sewed it back on. They put a pin in my arm and rebuilt my elbow joint, and it healed up, got well, and I can use it just as good as I can the other one. And if it hadn't have been for prayer, I would have never been able to have my arm, because when I come out of surgery, my wife prayed for me and my pastor, and the Lord assured me that I'd get it back. So when it started to heal, I started to use it, and I'd make it do everything that I needed it to do, and it healed up, and my arm got well, and my arm works good, and I've still got it. So I just thank the Lord for that.
Let's go back to that day. That's your story. Mom said they told you they wanted to amputate your arm.
They did.
And you said, is there a real doctor in this place? And the doctor that's heard the commotion happened to be one of the leading surgeons that pioneered reattachment.
Yeah.
He was a member of your Christian businessmen's?
Yeah, association.
Yeah. Tell him what he used to do at the meetings.
Well, whenever that I got the doctor that sewed my arm back, he was a Christian too, so they had a Christian reunion in Seattle in one of the hotels that was down there, and I was invited to come down. And whenever that I did, why, the doctor that sewed my arm back on, he was there, and he wanted to show other people what that he had done. And he would tell them, look what did I do? And I would tell him that he was the one that sewed it back, but the Lord was the one that healed it. And he told me whenever he sewed it back, that it would never, I'd never be able to use it again. He wanted to amputate it, and I insisted he sewed it back. and he said it would never work again. And whenever that he started showing it off, it was a working. And he'd always say, "Look what I done." And I would always tell him, "Look what the Lord had done." So that was what happened to that. But that was something else that happened to me that I've always give the Lord praise for. But then,
Tell a little bit about your mom. How old was she when she died?
well, my mom, whenever that she was living, she was out of a family that had a long history of life. Her grandpa lived to be 104 years old. Her mother, she lived to be 98 years old. And my mother, she lived to be 99, 29 days, and 7 months old. And I don't know whether I'll be granted that much time or not, but if I do, I'll be happy. But then if something happens to me that I'm crippled up, like my dad was after he had a stroke, I just assumed to go on and not face something like that. But we never know what's in life, and we don't know what life will bring us. But that is something that I hope never happens.
We'll start with Uncle John. Name all your brothers and sisters.
Well, there was 12 in the family that Mom had. The oldest one was John. The next one was Henry. My oldest sister was Laura. My next brother was Charlie Lee, which died when he was a year old. My next sister was Omi. My next sister was Maggie. Then I come along. Then after me, Ernest was born, but he was born 5 years after I was born. And when he was born, then they called me in to look at him. I guess I was a little bit jealous or something, but that was the ugliest thing that I ever looked at, because I'd always been Dad's boy, and I know that he was going to try to take over. And if I could have, I would have ridded him then. But Ernest lived to be a pretty old man. He was in his 70s when he died. But after Ernest came Geneva. Then after Geneva came Irvin. Then after Irvin came Alice. And then after Alice came Elmer. And he's the genius of the whole family, because he can do about anything, and he can make everything he wants to make out of nothing. And so we always say that he's the one that is the smartest, and he should have been born first, because that way he would have given us a little bit of a training down through life, and we would have known a whole lot more than what we know. So I guess that's just about the end of the whole story. But then after that I started, I tried to have kids that was as smart as Elmer was, but I never did make it.
Thanks, Dad. We'll close for now.
Well, truth is truth, ain't it?
Yeah, it's truth. It's truth. None of. Yeah.
Do you know of any of our family that is smart as Elmer?
Art. And Ray. Of course, me and Walt. Hang on. Okay. Oh, no, hang on. I'll have to have her call you back. Okay, bye. Well, let's shut it off then. Okay, Dad, let's start. You start with what you were telling me about last night, the worst day of your life.
I should address my...
Oh, yeah, you start who you are and again.
Yeah, I'm Harvey Hensley. And I want to tell about what the worst day of my life was.
I joined the Navy in 1941 on the 5th of December. I was sworn in on the 6th, and on the 7th the Japs hit Pearl Harbor. And after that I had enlisted, and after I was sworn in, I went home for a 3-day leave. And I got home on the 13th day of December in 1941. I stayed with my dad and mom, and we visited, and I got ready to leave. And when I got ready to leave, my dad, he told me, he says, I'll go back to the bus with you, and he did, and we went to Pine Hill, Kentucky to catch the bus. And when I crawled aboard the bus, the last thing that Dad did was he hugged me and he said, son, he said, I pray for you every day that you're gone, and says you'll make it back. Well, I left, and I went from there to Louisville, Kentucky, and I caught a plane there and went from Louisville to San Diego, California. And when I got to California, and being processed, they looked at my enlistment and they says, say, you're a pilot, you have a pilot license, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And they said, would you rather go into Navy Aviation? I said, I'd like that. So they took me down to Brownsville, California, and qualified me to see that I was a real pilot. And after I qualified on my first round, and I come back to the base, they scheduled me to go to Normandy, Oklahoma. And I went to Normandy, Oklahoma, and I took radio and navigation. And after I qualified there, and after I'd finished and graduated, I went from there to Jacksonville, Florida, and there I joined a squadron. We practiced it in the squadron there for about 15 days, and went from there to Whidbey Island, Washington. And after we got to Washington, we practiced landing and taking off on a mock aircraft carrier. And after we did that for 4 weeks, I left from there and went aboard ship. I went aboard the Yorktown, just off the coast of California. We flew from Washington down there and landed on the carrier, the first carrier that I had ever really been on or ever seen. From there, when we landed aboard, well then we headed for the South Pacific. And on the way down, while we practiced all the way down till we got down into Guadalcanal. We got to Guadalcanal and we had a conflict there with the Japanese, and we got a bomb on the forepart of our ship on the deck. We was headed back from there back to San Diego to get repairs, and this was on the last of April. We went back there to get repairs, and as we come by Honolulu, where they called us in, and they told us there that the Japs was going to invade Midway, and they sent us from there. And this was the 30th day of May at 42. And we headed for Midway, and when we got almost to Midway, we met up with the Japanese carriers, the ones that had bombed Pearl Harbor, and the whole fleet. We met up with them there, just out of Midway. And this was on the 5th of June in 42. And that day we sunk four carriers. We sunk 6 cruisers, 2 battleships, and 14 destroyers. We shot down all of their planes and that they had, and whenever the ships went down, there was something like 390 planes that the Japanese lost that day. Out of my squadron, there was 86 of us, and the morning we took off, there was 86 of us took off. that night when the day was over and we come back, there was 13 of us in my squadron left. We come back and the Yorktown had been hit. It had been torpedoed, and it was getting ready to sink. It was at night, and we was ordered to go to the Enterprise, which was 160 miles on the other side of Midway from where we was. So we went to the Enterprise. This was after we had sunk the Japanese fleet. When I got aboard the Enterprise, then we headed back to the South Pacific on the Enterprise. I stayed on it for a year, and on the tour there, we was at Guadalcanal. We was at just about all of the islands coming up through the chain, coming from Australia all the way up to the Philippines. And we had covered about 14 landings by the time we got to the Philippines, and then we landed. We made a landing on Leyte Island in the Philippines, and that was where we first really got into battle. That was it was the battle that I was never expecting to be in. But we went from there then to Okinawa, into Iwo, and after that we went on till the war was over. But the worst day of my life, I think, whenever that I think about it, was on the 4th of June in '42, whenever that we lost our squadron as many as we did, because these boys was boys that I had trained with, I had flew with, and we had worked together. And that night, whenever I come in, and whenever that I crossed over the Yorktown and it was sinking, I know that if I didn't make it to the Enterprise, I would never make it at all, because I would have had to went into the water someplace between there and the Enterprise. But the Lord was with me, and I made it. And after the battle was over, and we headed for the Pacific, I was pretty secure then, at that time, that I was capable of handling the job that I had.
Okay, Dad, how many pilots took off from the Yorktown?
There was 86.
Okay, and after it was sunk, how many were left?
There was 13 of us that was left. And that was the reason why that it was the worst day of my life, I think.
I want this for my grandsons too. I want you to tell them, what was your plane like? What kind of plane did you have?
The plane that I was flying in, they was all prop jobs. The first one that I learned to fly on was a F-4F fighter. And then I graduated to a F-6F fighter and bomber. And then I went from there to a SB-2C, and that was a bomber. And on that one I had a man a gunner that was behind me, in the seat behind me on that. And then after that we left Iwo, I went back to the F-46, and that was what I flew then till the war was finished and the war was over. But I still go back to the time whenever that my friends, during the time that I was in the Pacific, I myself was credited for 24 Japanese planes that I'd shot down. I was credited for one cruiser that I had dropped a bomb down through the stack into the engine room and blowed it up. I was credited, me and two others was credited with 3 destroyers. And when I come back to the States, I come back to San Diego, and they flew me from there to Seattle, and I went to the Bremerton Naval Base, not knowing what they wanted with me there. And when I got there, the Missouri that they had signed the peace treaty, it was said in that dock, my ship, they had brought it up, and it was sitting alongside of the Missouri, and President Truman come aboard the Missouri. And he gave him a presidential citation on the Missouri. And then he crossed from there over onto the Savo Island, the ship that I was on. And and he presented us with the presidential citation. And we was credited with more planes and more ships than any other small carrier out there during the war. And I just thank the Lord, you know, that I was able to make it back home because I never got wounded, never got hurt at any time. I had 5 planes that were shot up so bad when I come back aboard ship, they pushed them over the side because they wasn't repairable. But not one time did I ever get hurt in any way that was caused from the battles or anything that I was in. And I thought about my dad. He said he would pray, and I know that he was the one that prayed for me till I got home. After that I got home, I was pretty disturbed, but I married shortly after I come back home. The woman that I married was a great person. We had 4 children. They all growed up to be good people, good family, and I love my family. I love my grandchildren. I love my great-grandchildren, and the Lord has blessed me for 83 years here on this earth. I'll soon be 84, and whenever that I leave this world, I have nothing to fear, and I have nothing to worry about because I know that I'm going to hold on to Him, and He's going to hold on to me till I make it to glory. And this is the end of the time. I guess there's not much else to say about it, so I just thank the Lord for it.
Now, skip on up till you got to Washington. When you lived in Washington, tell about the tugboat.
Yeah, after that I got out of service and my family was born, and I moved to the state of Washington. I always loved Washington State, and I went out there, and first thing I did when I went out, I set up a gravel plant and run a gravel plant for a while. And there was a gentleman come along one day that had a tugboat, and he told me, he said, "What would you take for your gravel plant?" And I said, "I'll take your tugboat." So that was where that I started to see again. I always loved the water. So I took his boat and I used it then to haul logs with, to pull barges with, to berth ships with. And I worked up and down the north coast there, up into Canada and down into Oregon. And it was just a wonderful life. But then I got to thinking one day, I've been away from my family for so many years, my people. I think I'll go back to Kentucky. I didn't know what my wife, Laura, would say about it. So I went in one day and I says, "Honey," I says, "we're going to pack up and go back to Kentucky." And she says, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." "How come?" I said, "Well, we need to be back with our people for a while." So we sold out and we come back to Kentucky, moved back to Broadhead, and bought a little farm up there, and there we lived till Laura passed away.
What did you do after you came back to Kentucky?
After I come back from Washington, I got a job and running a shop for a coal company in London, and I worked at it. I supervised it for 10 years, and then whenever that I quit that, I retired. And that was after that I had retired. Well, then I lost Laura, and then after I lost Laura, I found another girl that I had known, that I went to school with whenever that I was in school, and she had lost her husband. It was Bethel Comics. She was married to Albert Phelan, and me and her, we decided that we could have a few good years together. So Bethel and I are together now, We love each other. We enjoy traveling. We enjoy each other. And maybe the Lord will give us a few more years together. And we just appreciate everything that people has done for us. Her family is a great family. They all treat me good, and I love them. So I guess the rest of my days, why, Bethel and I will probably share each other. So I thank the Lord for that.
Okay. You went through the whole battle with Yorktown being sunken the rest of your life in 11 minutes, Dad. No, that's doing good. When did you start preaching, Dad?
I started preaching in 1974. And I've had minister's license ever since. I belong to the Ministerial Association of Kentucky.
Where all did you preach?
How often do I preach?
Where?
Oh, I have preached in, I guess, as many as 90 different churches throughout the state. And I have never pastored. I have co-pastored 2 different times. But I have never pastored, but evangelized since that I've been preaching. I've preached in Ohio, and Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Florida, Georgia,
Michigan?
and Alabama.
Michigan.
Michigan.
There's a couple of things you can do. Either see these or...
Now that's not your whole life.
That's, well, I'm still living.
I want you to tell about the night your daughter was born.
Oh. I better not get on that. Don't get. No, I'll get back to the night that my daughter was born. I went to the hospital, and my wife, she had went to the hospital already 4 times to have my daughter, and she backed out 3 times. And this time, I thought it would be another occasion, same as the other one was. So I sat in the room with her for a while, and I went in the library, and I sat back in a lounge chair, and I put my feet up on a bookcase and went to sleep. And about 6 o'clock in the morning, the nurse come in and says, "Mr. Hensley," and I heard her, but I couldn't say nothing. And she called me again about 3 times. She called me, and she come over and shook me. And I woke up enough, and I said, "What's wrong?" She says, "You've got a daughter." I had my legs and my body had went to sleep to where I couldn't move. And she told me, "Are you going to get up and see her?" And I says, "I can't get up." And she rubbed my legs and got me loosened up to where I could go. And that was my first daughter, my only daughter, and the one that is still my best daughter.
I know Mom told me that the doctor said, "Did it shock you that much having a daughter?" That you couldn't even move, it paralyzed you. Well, Dad, we about filled up another one.
So that was it.
You got anything else you want to put on there?
No, that's all.
I want everybody to know we had the best dad you could have. And we had a wonderful life growing up with Dad. Thanks, Dad.
You're welcome, honey. I love you.
I love you.
You're my special daughter. And only daughter.
Okay.